In the 16th century, power was not shown only through armies or conquered lands, but through symbols. Kings rarely met one another, yet they competed constantly, and one of their favorite weapons was spectacle. Diplomatic gifts were not gestures of kindness. They were statements of dominance. The more impossible the gift, the louder the message: this is how far my reach extends. Among gold, spices, and rare artifacts, nothing impressed European courts more than living creatures from distant lands. Exotic animals became proof that an empire could seize not only territory, but nature itself. That is how a rhinoceros, born far from Europe, entered a story that was never meant to be his. The animal was first offered by an Asian sultan to Afonso de Albuquerque, the Portuguese viceroy of Goa. What sounded like an honor quickly revealed itself as a burden. The rhinoceros was enormous, weighing several tons, untamable, unpredictable. Feeding it required constant effort. Containing it demanded fear rather than control. It was not a treasure, it was a problem. Albuquerque understood something important: a creature this rare was too valuable to destroy, but too dangerous to keep. So he made a decision shaped by politics, not compassion. The rhinoceros would be sent away, transformed from a living challenge into a diplomatic solution. Its destination was Portugal. In May of 1515, the ship arrived in Lisbon, carrying something Europe had not seen alive for more than 1,000 years. The city reacted instantly. Crowds gathered. Whispers turned into amazement. Scholars argued. Common people stared in disbelief. For many, the rhinoceros felt unreal, as if a creature from ancient texts had stepped out of myth and into the harbor. At court, King Manuel I welcomed the animal as proof of Portugal's global power. It joined his collection of exotic beasts, including a famous albino elephant whose pale skin had already become a symbol of the empire's reach. Together, these animals were meant to inspire awe. But fascination fades quickly when reality settles in. The rhinoceros was powerful, restless, and difficult to control. What impressed visitors also frightened handlers. What symbolized prestige also carried danger. Slowly, admiration turned into inconvenience. And once again, the animal's fate would be decided not by what it was, but by what it could represent. Because in a world ruled by ambition, even wonder has an expiration date. Keeping the rhinoceros soon proved harder than displaying it. Chains could restrain his body, but not his nature. Each movement reminded the court that this was not an ornament, not a sculpture, but a force taken from a land that was never meant to be tamed. What had once drawn admiration now demanded resources, space, and constant vigilance. King Manuel I began to see the animal differently. Not as a marvel, but as a political opportunity waiting to be repackaged. At the same time, Portugal sought stronger ties with the Vatican. Pope Leo X, known for his love of art, curiosity, and exotic creatures, seemed like the perfect recipient for an unforgettable gift. And so the rhinoceros was chosen once again, not because of his value as a living being, but because of his value as a message. Preparations were made quietly. A new journey was planned. A stronger crate. Heavier chains. The sea would once again carry the weight of a decision made far from the one who would suffer its consequences. As the ship departed, the rhinoceros left behind the land that had briefly known him, heading toward a destiny defined entirely by human desire. The voyage itself was long and unforgiving. Inside the dark hull, days blended into nights. The smell of salt, wood, and iron replaced the air of open land. His strength weakened not through battle, but through confinement. Along the way, the ship made a stop near the French coast, at the island of Château d'If. Word spread quickly. Even the King of France wished to see the creature everyone spoke of. Once more, the rhinoceros became a spectacle, admired, discussed, and measured by eyes that never questioned the price of that curiosity. Then the sea changed. Near the coast of Italy, a storm rose without mercy. Waves struck the ship with growing force. Wood cracked. Orders were shouted. Panic spread faster than control. In the chaos, the rhinoceros remained trapped below deck, bound by chains that had been meant to protect others from him. When the ship sank, there was no escape. The animal fought water instead of enemies, fear instead of fate. But strength means nothing when freedom is denied. Far from the plains where he was born, far from any choice, the rhinoceros drowned beneath the waves, erased not by nature, but by human hands. And the sea closed above him, carrying silence where wonder once stood. Days later, the sea returned what it had taken. The massive body of the rhinoceros washed ashore, heavy, lifeless, unrecognizable from the living marvel that had once crossed continents. Fishermen and villagers stared in disbelief. News traveled fast. The impossible had happened, the only rhinoceros in Europe was dead. But death did not end his journey. When word reached the Portuguese court, the response was not mourning, nor reflection. It was instruction. The animal was ordered to be recovered, preserved, and sent onward to Rome as planned. Even lifeless, he still had value. Even silent, he could still serve. His body was prepared with care that felt disturbingly practical. Skin removed, treated, stretched. Flesh discarded. What had once been power and movement became an object meant to impress. The rhinoceros was transformed into something hollow, a version of himself designed to survive admiration, not truth. In 1516, the preserved body finally arrived at the Vatican. Crowds gathered. Scholars examined. Artists sketched. The Pope himself marveled at the creature he would never see alive. To Europe, this was not a tragedy. It was a triumph of reach, proof that the world could be conquered, collected, and displayed. Among those fascinated was the German artist Albrecht Dürer. Though he never saw the rhinoceros in person, descriptions and rough sketches were enough to inspire an image that would become immortal. His engraving spread across the continent, shaping how generations would imagine the animal, armored, almost mythical, more legend than life. Ironically, the most famous image of the rhinoceros was inaccurate. Plates of armor that never existed. Features imagined, not observed. The truth of the animal was replaced by an interpretation that suited the era's hunger for wonder. And yet, that image endured. The real rhinoceros, meanwhile, faded from record. After time spent in Rome, his preserved body vanished. Some believe it was moved to Florence. Others think it was destroyed during the sack of Rome in 1527. No inventory confirms his fate. No document mourns his loss. What survived was not the animal, but the idea of him. A creature taken from his world, passed from ruler to ruler, admired by thousands, yet never allowed to simply exist. His life became a symbol. His death, a footnote. His body, a mystery. And still, his story refuses to disappear. The rhinoceros did not leave behind descendants, territories, or monuments. What he left behind was a question, one that still echoes centuries later. How many lives were consumed not by necessity, but by vanity? How many journeys were forced not by survival, but by power disguised as curiosity? His story is not unique. It is simply one of the few that survived long enough to be told. In the 16th century, the sea was not just water. It was a corridor of ambition. Ships crossed it carrying gold, spices, faith, weapons, and living beings treated as trophies. The rhinoceros became part of that system the moment his existence was transformed into currency. From sultan to viceroy. From viceroy to king. From king to pope. Each transfer stripped away another layer of life, until nothing remained but possession. No one asked if he could survive the journey. No one wondered what captivity meant for a creature shaped by open land and instinct. The question was never, should we, only, can we? And the sea answered. The ocean does not negotiate. It does not care for titles or intentions. When the ship went down, the hierarchy vanished. King and animal, gift and prisoner, all were equal beneath the waves. Chains meant nothing. Power meant nothing. Only weight, water, and silence. Yet even then, humanity refused to listen. Instead of reflection, there was preservation. Instead of grief, there was display. The rhinoceros became an artifact, proof of reach, proof of dominance, proof that the world could be taken apart and rearranged at will. His body was admired more than his life ever was. And so the engraving by Dürer became immortal, while the real creature faded into uncertainty. History remembered the image better than the being. A perfect metaphor for how often representation replaces reality. But stories like this endure for a reason. They force us to look back and recognize patterns that never truly ended. The desire to own what we do not understand. To collect what should remain free. To confuse admiration with entitlement. The rhinoceros did not choose his journey. He did not understand diplomacy, alliances, or religion. He understood fear, confinement, exhaustion. He understood the slow erosion of self that comes when movement is denied and purpose is stolen. And still, 500 years later, his presence lingers. In museums. In drawings. In forgotten records. In this story. Because the sea, for all its cruelty, preserved something humans often erase, memory. It returned his body to shore. It carried his name through time. It made sure that what was meant to be spectacle became testimony. The rhinoceros who died in the sea was never meant to be famous. Yet he became unforgettable. Not because of power, but because of loss. Not because of conquest, but because of consequence. And perhaps that is the quiet lesson hidden beneath the waves. That every creature taken from its world leaves behind a wound. That every journey forced leaves a trace. That history is not only written by kings and artists, but also by those who had no voice, yet whose silence still speaks. As long as this story is told, he is no longer just an object, an engraving, or a mystery. He is a reminder. A reminder that wonder without empathy becomes cruelty. That curiosity without restraint becomes destruction. And that the sea remembers everything. Even what humanity tries to forget. If this story stayed with you longer than expected, let it stay a little more. Leave a like, it helps stories like this keep traveling. If you believe some histories deserve to be remembered, subscribe. There are many more waiting to be told. Tell me in the comments, was this story new to you, or did it change the way you see the past? If this made you pause, reflect, or feel something difficult to name, share it with someone who values stories that matter. And if you want to continue this journey through forgotten lives and hidden histories, the next story is already waiting for you.